I'm trained to do 30-second pitches in 3 minutes, so I can be off real quick. So rarely did policy ever have this kind of catalytic effect in the markets. I believe that Indian government, particularly on the EPR framework for plastics, has done a phenomenal job. I'll give you some quick numbers. I think everybody knows that 30% recycled content for rigids, 10% for monomaterial and 5% for MLP is what the government has mandated next year. These are eminently achievable. And I felt that India's EPR policy is probably one of the most progressive policies in the world when it comes to driving extended producer responsibility. First is, it has catalyzed the entire industry to take up all the elements of sustainability, right from design for recyclability to collection to actually working with companies like Banyan Nation in partnering and championing sustainable solutions. I'll give you a quick case study. Back in 2017 and 2018, a company like Unilever had already started its work on incorporating recycled content into its rigid packaging. Today, almost all of the top brands that you are all familiar with, like Surf Excel, Comfort, Vaseline, Dove, they all use in excess of 30% and in some cases 60 to 70% recycled plastics. For the rigids. So the question of incorporation of 30% recyclable materials, either in PET or in polyolefins, which is PP and PE, is a very well solved problem statement. First, in terms of the capacities in PET, I think you quite well understand that over $800 million of investments have been funneled into the Indian recycling ecosystem in the last 5 years alone. After the government had announced these regulations, dozens, if not hundreds of startups have been able to raise Series A and Series B, and we've been one of the biggest beneficiaries of that policy as well. Now, Banyan Nation, as you know, works with over 70 brands in the country today on the rigid fractions, and I think I'm happy to take this offline and describe to you all the technologies in PET, PP and PE that can further the achievement of compliance in the rigid segment. Now, coming to flexibles, and I'm really thrilled to be part of this panel with Constantia as well. They've been the market leader for a while. We've recently launched our flexibles. So we've translated all the innovations in our supply chain. And for the uninitiated, let me give you a 30-second spiel. I'm so sorry to be taking your time. So what we do is we work with thousands of kabadiwalas, bhandiwalas and raddiwalas in our country, in all the southern states in India. The kabadiwalas are trained by Banyan Nation to segregate the plastic based on certain quality specifications. So think of it as, like Mishra ji was mentioning in the morning, what Amul does to milk, we do to plastics. So we train the kabadiwalas to segregate the plastic based on certain quality specifications, whether it is film or whether it is rigid, and also further in terms of the polymer, whether it is PET, PP or PE. And further within polyethylene, you have injection grade, extrusion grade and blow grade. So this sort of sophistication already exists within the informal sector. And I keep saying this, and I'd like to reiterate this. If ever there was an Olympics for recycling, that is one medal would have definitely won in the last 50 years, because India's informal value chain is phenomenal.
Unaided by any sensor or automation, is it? Unaided by any...
That's a great point. Unaided by any sensor and automation. I'd actually like to add that it's a great question. Many of the innovations that we see today in terms of putting in a watermark in the polymer is primarily addressed at the Western solutions of segregating. What are the Western solutions of segregating? Humans basically are not primarily engaged in the gig economy of recycling in the Western ecosystems. So for example, if you go to New York and then they'll say, we are going to put a reverse vending machine at every block in New York. Think of Hyderabad. I'm going to give you some very good numbers. Hyderabad has about 12 million people, give or take. There are 3,000 kabadiwalas or the stationary aggregators at every street corner in Hyderabad. I'll give you more math here. For every square kilometer in Hyderabad, Chennai, Bangalore, we've mapped about 25 cities in India. For every square kilometer, there are 4 kabadiwalas. And the reason for that is, for every 250 homes, there is one kabadiwala. Meaning that the quantum of waste that 250 homes generate in India, whether it is cardboard, paper, plastic, can be collected, aggregated and segregated in a space of 500 square feet. And that is how India has evolved over the last 50 years. So the supply, think of kabadiwalas as your kirana stores. Think of kabadiwalas as your small acreage farmers. And think of your kabadiwalas as the small milk farmer. Just as we had layered microfinance elements to give them loan, to give them credit, the fat testing meter to test the quality of milk. Similarly, all these solutions that India had put in past to solve other complexities and other challenges can be very well applied, as Mishra ji mentioned in the morning. So this is a model that lends itself very well to the Indian context. I know I'm taking, you can cut me off anytime. I don't have much to add. You can cut me off anytime. So the supply chain, I believe, is the bedrock on which the EPR regulation will be successful. Venki, so that I bring back to the question on hand here. I think India has a fabulous supply chain. India's gig economy is phenomenal. And Banyan Nation's work is a testament to that, because we today do 15,000 tons of recycling, supplying to over 70 brands, primarily through the informal sector. So the policy that was put in place for rigids is 30% leading up to 60% in the next 5 years. For flexibles, we start with 10% and then gradually increase to 20%. And this is for mono material. For MLP, we actually start with only 5%. Now, as we have to take a very nuanced approach as we think about flexibles recycling. So for monopolymer material, the current requirement is only 10% inclusion. The government has said PCR, which is pre-consumer and post-consumer. So that gives you already a buffer of incorporating plant-related waste, which really catches up there. Then there has been an MSME waiver also that has been provided. So then you have a 15 to 20% waiver already created. Given all these factors, availability of pre-consumer post-industrial waste and the existing infrastructure and the availability of, let's say, I'll give you some tangible examples. What are the mono materials in India? LDP milk pouches, BOPP milk pouches. Then also we have to create the differentiation between primary, secondary and tertiary applications. Sorry, I want to highlight one more thing. FSSAI has provided the ruling on PET, right, but they haven't yet provided the ruling on polyolefins for primary applications. So which means that currently I am unclear, and most likely most of the people are unclear, that given that polyolefins cannot be used for primary packaging, they are also not part of the EPR mandate. So on the secondary and tertiary packaging today, we have a lot of material that is available, like LDP milk pouches, like the plant waste, the post-consumer film, for example, the fabric packaging. So the quantum of waste, when you look at it in a very nuanced basis in terms of raffia, LDP, milk pouches, non-food grade, non-MSME, I think is quite well covered to meet the 10% and 5%. Absolutely. Absolutely. So Banyan Nation is not the only champion in this space. So just to give you a sense, Banyan Nation obviously has de-inking technologies. We are US FDA approved and so on and so forth. But given the influx of investments in India owing to the EPR regulations, there are so many companies in India that have invested heavily in deodorizing equipments, advanced extruders, advanced washing lines, and I have very authentic data to believe that Banyan Nation obviously is expanding to 45,000 tons, but we are a drop in the ocean. There are several other companies that have the capabilities to drive the secondary and tertiary inclusion of film in the quantum of 10% to meet the EPR obligations.